Hello there. I want to start my seminar presentation with a very simple question. What is the first thing that comes into your mind when you hear the term civil engineering? Well, according to my personal observations, I have seen people start visualizing tall buildings or skyscrapers in their mind when they hear the term civil engineering. But if you keep interest in this department, you must be well aware of the fact that making tall buildings, or in general, making buildings, is not the only thing that civil engineers do. It's actually one of the sectors where civil engineers work. Actually, any modification to our physical world that enables us using the natural resources in a more efficient way involves civil engineering. For example, it might be a wastewater treatment plant, it might be an irrigation system, it might be a highway or railway network system, or it might be actually anything that has something to do with the alteration of our physical world in a positive way. But for today's session, for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will be talking about skyscrapers that also have the capacity of growing crops. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening everyone, depending upon the time you are watching me. My name is Amiya Sarkar and I am a final year civil engineering student from University of Lucknow. So, without further ado, let's start the seminar. The name I have given to this seminar is Why Crop Growing Skyscrapers Are the Future, a second degree domestication of food. An interesting choice of naming, but you will understand why I have chosen that when we will go deep into the seminar. Well, actually, this slide is all about giving the background or the overview and also kind of the outcomes of this seminar that tells what you will learn or gain if you stick to us for the next 15 to 20 minutes. First of all, I'll be talking about my inspiration, what makes me inspired, talking about this topic or researching about this topic. And then I'll talk about some of the facts that make conventional farming looks outdated. Another interesting thing I'll be talking about that is why we need to look for something new. What are actually the reasons behind this? And what are the ideas? I'll be talking about those. Then some of the advantages and disadvantages of making skyscrapers. What are the shortcomings? And then why this idea that is making skyscrapers that also have the capacity of growing crops makes more sense in 2020s. Then I will show you some case study, actually a couple of case studies. One is from India, another is from America. Then I will conclude my whole seminar and I will give you an overall idea again. And coming to the next slide, here I'll be talking about some of the facts that make conventional farming looks a little outdated. And I have also got some alarming data here, so be prepared for that. The first one here is, by 2050, 70% of our population will live in city areas. 70%. That is more than two-thirds of our population will be living in cities by 2050. 2050 is not too far away, right? And the next big thing is our human population will touch the 10 billion mark by that same time frame, which is 2050. Quite an achievement, right? But actually seeing from the sustainability perspective, it's not. We are actually running the opposite direction. The next point here is the decrease of per head cropland by 0.8% to 1.7% by 2050. That is actually understandable considering the huge growth of population. And at the same time, our land resource is constant. So when the population grows, the per head land resource decrease automatically. Then comes the inefficient use of fertilizer. That is also understandable. To keep up with the growing population, we need to grow as much food. And our land resources is same as what it was about 1,000 or let's say million years ago. So we had to do something to keep up the pace. And we have chosen using fertilizers inefficiently. And that leads to a situation called eutrophication in water bodies. And what happens here? Algae and other vegetation, actually micro vegetations, grows in water bodies, especially the surface of the water bodies, and that uh, defend oxygen to get dissolved in the water. Consequently, the dissolved oxygen gets decreased, and it automatically affects the aquatic life of the water bodies. And finally, since we human are at the top of the food chain, the cumulative effects of inefficient fertilizer use, pesticides, affect our health negatively. And now coming to the next slide, which is really connected to the previous one, we want to focus on why we need to look for something new. Here, the biggest two reasons are: the first one, growing population. We have already seen we will be needing to feed 10 billion mouths by 2050, which is 3 billion more than current population. And the second one is limited land resources. Actually, the land is decreasing per head because of other uses of land areas. Another trend we have seen in the previous slide is urbanization. People are moving towards cities, but at the same time being dependent on village areas when it comes to food production. So where do all the things we have just discussed lead us? Simple answer is some alternative ideas. And what are the alternative ideas? There are actually many, but one of the most potential ideas among those is crop growing skyscrapers. Actually, another term is very common in this regard, that is vertical farming. And skyscrapers that grows crop is one step ahead of vertical farming that we will see in the next slides. Now, let's talk about the idea itself. Well, when we see the case of human population shifting towards cities, we see that at some point cities spreaded vertically, not horizontally. Why that is the case? That is because city areas are limited. So we had to grow vertically, because vertical has no limit. That is, sky has no limit, right? So we are looking here at the same idea. We need to do the same arrangement for plants, and it is called vertical farming. That is already a very common thing in growing vegetation. So what is skyscrapers then? It is actually very similar to vertical farming, but here we are looking at buildings that are very tall and has really modern technologies for growing plants. And the main objective of making skyscrapers is actually meeting the requirement locally, so that we don't need to depend on the foods that is coming from village areas or, let's say, remote areas. So indirectly, what are we doing here? We are actually cutting down the transportation cost. That is actually affecting the overall cost of the products. At the same time, we're cutting down the emissions, very importantly, carbon emissions. Another thing is we are avoiding the damages that is done to the roads during such transportations. And there are some many other advantages. And talking about advantages, coming to the next slide, we'll be talking about that. And here, talking about advantages, as you can see, this slide contains actually the most number of bullet points. Yeah, that means it has actually a lot of advantages. And here, talking about the first advantage, which is savings of one of the most precious resources we have, that is land. While we are growing crops in skyscrapers, it requires up to 99% less land area as compared to the traditional farming. That is understandable because we are here talking about expanding vertically, and vertical direction has literally no limit technically. So it requires up to 99% less land compared to the traditional farming. And talking about the next advantage, which is also a saving of another precious resource, that is water. Actually, by growing crops in skyscrapers, we can save up to 95% water as compared to the traditional farming. The next one is increased crop yield. Crops are actually grown in highly controlled environment. Everything is controlled by human here in crop growing skyscrapers. For example, the amount of water that is required by a plant, the humidity, the nutritious value that is required for a certain plant, or maybe the intensity of light, and the every single requirement is different depending upon the plants. So we can actually design our system according to the plants we are growing in there. Another big advantage we get from crop growing skyscrapers is we require very less energy on transportation. How is that possible? Actually, we can build a skyscraper in the middle of a city, and that means we can actually meet the requirement of our food locally. And when we are able to do that, we don't need to import foods from remote area anymore. And indirectly, we are saving money on transportation. Also, the emissions are being decreased. Along with saving water and land area, we can also save soil. We can retain the quality of soil by adapting some of the agricultural methods, such as aeroponic or hydroponic. And these methods are being used highly efficiently in vertical farming. So in these methods, we actually don't require any soil to grow food. Another big achievement in vertical farming or indoor farming or in general skyscrapers, there are no use of pesticide. How is that possible? That is because the crop is being grown in highly controlled environment. So we don't really require any pesticide. We are not dealing with any kind of outsiders here. Thousands of tons of food are wasted every year because of weather conditions by natural disasters. And here the wastage due to weather condition is zero. That is because we are not dependent on weather condition at all. So we are saving a lot of food here. Another big benefit we get from adapting indoor farming is by doing it, we actually allow the native plants and animals to thrive. Intensive traditional farming leads us towards deforestation, that is, destruction of precious plants. And by doing that, we are automatically destructing the habitats of some of the native animals. So if we adapt skyscrapers that grow plants, we are actually allowing native plants and animals to thrive. And at the end of the day, all the advantages add up and promote sustainability. So we have seen it has actually a lot of advantages. But now let's talk about some of the difficulties, some of the technicalities, some of the challenges that is involved in the process. We are here dealing with a really controlled environment where every single ingredient has to be supplied to the plants to thrive. Talking about the ingredients, plants basically need three. First of all, the water, then crucial nutrients, and also the light. Let's talk about the water first. Here in 2022, we have many advanced technology available for irrigation. For example, drip irrigation. Here, we apply water directly at the root of the plants. This process is really efficient and requires up to 99% less water as compared to traditional farming. And as far as lighting is concerned, the LED technology is advanced enough to satisfy plants with their photosynthesis need. At the same time, being very efficient with the electricity. Finally, the crucial nutrients. And again, we are talking here about really controlled environment. And as soon as we know what type of plants we are gonna grow into our system, we can estimate the amount of ingredient and the type of ingredient we will be needing. So that makes the system extremely efficient with the fertilizers also. And when our food is grown in the farm, we are left with only two technicalities, that is collection and packaging. We don't need extensive transportation here as we are growing our food in the city areas and our targeted customers are also living around the skyscrapers. Well, enough talking about advantages. There are some shortcomings also. So let's talk about them now. The first and most obvious one here is the high initial investment. We are talking here making the whole building and also the all the arrangement we need to grow crops. So initial investment is really high in this system. And another important thing we need to bear in mind is that we need to supply energy from outside. Since we need to irrigate our plants artificially, also we need to provide the light artificially. There, the energy requirement is really high as compared to the traditional farming. Literally, in traditional farming, there is no need of supplementary energy. So that left us with renewable energy sources. Because if we use the regular energy sources like diesel, petrol, or coal, then we will be making even more emissions than the traditional farming. Another important thing to note here is there are certain crops that are difficult to grow inside, and some intensive researches are already in the process to deal with the problem. So, even with all the disadvantages we have with the system, why this makes more sense in 2020s? The most important problem we need to resolve here is the supplementary energy. And here in 2020s, the advancement in renewable energy sector is huge. Every single country is focusing more on their renewable energy sources. So that automatically means that renewable energy is more available than it was, let's say, a decade or 2 decades ago. And here is where the advancement of technology comes into play. LED lights are available that requires really low energy to operate. And we have irrigation systems like drip irrigation, where we can apply water directly into the root of the plants. And the efficiency of the system is very high as compared to the traditional farming. And the last one is people in 2020s care more about sustainability, our planet health. So the consumers are showing interest worldwide of purchasing products that are sustainable, that are good for the planet. So here, all the three bullet points together show that there has never been a better time than these for indoor grown plants. Okay, enough on theoretical analysis. So now let's dive into some practical examples. Some of the companies, those are already involved in indoor farming and doing great. So the first company I have chosen for my case study is Aero Farms. This is basically an American-based company founded in 2014 in Newark. Then they shifted their headquarters from Newark to Newark, New Jersey. Actually, they began their journey quite an interesting way. They used an abundant steel factory of size 70,000 square feet. And now in 2022, they are one of the biggest companies in vertical farming or indoor farming. They are actually using a farming method called aeroponics for their farm, in which they use up to 95% less water as compared to the conventional farming. Along with that, they are using very efficient LED lights for photosynthesis of their plants. For their whole production system, they never use pesticides. Regardless of the season or weather condition, they are producing year-round crops. Talking about crops, they are currently producing over 550 different varieties of plants, including leafy greens, berries, tomatoes, and many more. According to their official data, they are able to produce 70 times more crop yield than the traditional farming by unit surface area. That is an amazing achievement. And this company is currently partnering with Amazon Fresh for selling their product along with their own official website. And currently they have 317 millions of revenue. And here is a short comparison between the technique used by Aerofarm and conventional farming technique. In aerofarms, no pesticide is being used for production, but in conventional farming, we all know the scenario. Pesticides are being used intensively. Up to 95% less water is required in aerofarm as compared to the traditional farming. In aerofarm, the crops are grown in highly controlled environment. So outside weather has no effect on their production. But in conventional farming, the yield is highly dependent on outside weather or climate condition. 70 times higher crop yield can be found in aerofarms. Another important thing to note here is in aerofarm, year-round production is happening no matter what's going outside. But in conventional farming, the type of crop and the amount of yield is dependent upon weather or climatic condition. And the final and probably the most important thing about aerofarms is the food requirement is met locally. But for conventional farming, most of the foods that is grown in the field is transported to the city areas for the consumers. And by doing such practices, aerofarm is actually saving some precious energy and also cutting down some emissions. Here is some of the pictures that is taken from aerofarm. In the first picture, we can see they are using multicolored light arrangement for growing some leafy greens. And in the very next picture, we can see their aeroponic system by which they are growing the plants. There you can also see the different components they are using in their system. After aerofarm, I have chosen an Indian company named Urban Kishan for my second case study. This company was founded in 2017, that's not too far ago, and it is currently situated in Hyderabad. They have 3 retailer stores in Manikanda, Jubilee Hills, and Gachibowli. Each of the farm is about 20 square feet, and another 1,000 square feet is allocated for the retail store. That means the customers can go into their farm and at the same time shop their requirement from another side of the farm. In their 2,000 square feet farming system, they are capable of a crop yield that requires 1.75 acre in traditional farming. But in this case, they are using a method called hydroponic instead of aeroponic. In this system, the root of the plants are suspended in water and the required nutrients are actually put in the suspension, and by absorbing nutrients and water from the system, the plants actually grow. In their farms, they are also saving up to 95% of the water as compared to the traditional farming. Here also, they don't require to use any pesticide for their production. And with using up to 95% less water and no pesticide, they are able to grow 30 times more crop than traditional farming. In this very short period of time, they have already become a company of 5 million. Here is also some of the picture from the Urban Kisan, their system, their hydroponic system. Here is another one. They are also using that multicolor lighting system for the photosynthesis of their plants. So coming to the next slide, let's conclude the whole seminar now. So why we need to adapt another farming idea in the first place? That is because our horizontal space is limited and the vertical space is unlimited. So it's an obvious choice to use the vertical spaces. The next big thing we have learned from this seminar is the move has to be smart. Why? That's because there are some drawbacks and also some further research are required in this field. So the move has to be smart. Another big thing we have pointed out from this seminar is in these 2020s, the idea of making a crop growing skyscrapers make more sense because of the advanced technology availability. The next one is by growing crops in skyscrapers, we can meet the food requirement locally, and that can cut down the transportation cost, also the carbon emissions. And last one, but not the least, is by adapting crop growing skyscrapers, we are indirectly actually allowing the biodiversity to thrive and promoting a sustainable, better world for tomorrow. And here are some of the research papers where I took help from. If you are interested, you can also go through the research papers individually. And that was it from my side. Hope you really enjoyed the show. And thank you so much for hanging there till the very end. And now it's your turn. If you have any doubt or questions, please don't hesitate to ask that in the comment box. We will try our best to answer your question. Thank you once again.